Getting everybody buy-in into the direction, being able to take the feedback loop.
Put the debrief in your system. What worked, what didn't work, what did you learn, what's the correction, and by when. It will make such a difference.
Break things into little chunks and measure them. A 13-week race out of your 90 days, and every week measure how the progress is going. And if you need to adjust, make those adjustments before it becomes that big, giant issue at the end.
We need discipline, we need structure, and more importantly, we need adherence to the reviews. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Business Lunatics, the weekly show where four fearless loonies, we pull back the curtain on the wild, the wonderful, and sometimes downright ridiculous world of entrepreneurship. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be crazy. So here we are with no fluff, no BS, just business madness. And today's topic is going to be about annual planning, quarterly reviews, and debriefing. And on that note, let's have Rochelle take it.
I'd love to. Okay, let's start. We've got to review what we're doing. We want to see where we stand. And I have this very, very specific formula that I'd like to share. Are we open for it?
Yeah,
Sure. Absolutely. Go for it.
Let's go.
Let's hear what you got.
Let's debrief. Number one, we want to look at what worked and why. The why is so important because the reason we want to know what worked and why so that we can repeat it over and over again. Now we go into what didn't work and why. We've got to figure it out. And then once we look at why it didn't work, we have to ask ourselves, what did we learn? What's the correction? And most important, by when? We've all made mistakes and we all have to dig in and say, I've got to correct it. I've got to do something different. And I just find for myself, if I don't put a by when I'm going to correct it and put it back on the calendar and address this again, it goes into the wish list of who the heck knows where that lands. The chances of it being corrected is slim to none. So we really got to get very specific. What worked and why? We've got to give ourselves some credit, celebrate our wins, understand what is the thing that we're doing that's contributing to our success. So A, that we can repeat it, and B, that we can train others in our companies that can work on our behalf. What didn't work and why, it's not for us to browbeat ourselves, but it's for us to take inventory and say, what did I not think about? Is it an internal problem? Is it a mindset issue? Did I panic? Did I fear going into action? Or is it an operational? I've got to hire somebody. But it's so important to understand the why. We can then go into the correction. And again, it's got to be by when. Certain things we can correct very quickly, other things not. We might be waiting for something, and then we've got to put it in our calendar to make sure that we don't ignore it and that we can come back to it. So I do this monthly because the quicker that you can catch a mistake, it becomes a mistake and not a crisis. If we wait long term and say, it's not a big deal, by the time we get to correcting it, it's not only is it not a big deal, it becomes a massive mamma mia. So you want to look at what do we need to do that can keep us on track, that can keep us focused, that we can bring in the team and make them effective, and what do we need to course correct. So that's my thing in terms of moving forward. If I do this, and if I literally advise all my clients to do this, we can predict our growth pattern because we know our strength and we're working accordingly.
Well, Rochelle, I would say that a lot of what you're talking about really comes down to one thing, and that's discipline, right? It's discipline and structure. For example, the one that I love the most is you have all these companies that have this platform that they use called EOS, right? And its entire focus on EOS is to help build that structure and that discipline. And and trying to get companies and the individuals within the companies to adhere to some process. And it's an internal process, right? The issue, though, is if the individuals themselves are not people that are willing to live within a structure or follow a discipline, the entire thing breaks down. Now, all of a sudden, you get to the next quarter and you want to do your quarterly review. And you know what? I got something else going on. I'm going off in a different direction. Yeah, well, let's do this tomorrow, right? And tomorrow comes and it still doesn't work. So,
You gotta hold each other accountable.
exactly right. And so, I'm kind of bringing out the elephant in the room when it comes to this process of debrief and reviews, annual plans or quarterly reviews, and then identifying what you do forward. And it does require work. There's no question
Yes.
about it,
Yeah.
right?
But it
And there
requires
is no
handholding.
shortcut.
Hello.
Go ahead.
But you got to
Require-
get everybody, you've got to get everybody buy-in initially into the whole aspect if you're working with a team.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're a solopreneur and then, solopreneur, you can keep yourself accountable. And that's a great idea. What you mentioned, Rochelle, is track, take a look, why, and all that stuff yourself. But if you're working with a team, you've got to really get everybody to buy into that thing. And that's where I kind of talk a lot about getting a team lined up in line like a racing rowing team where everybody has one oar and you got to get everybody in sync and you've got to get that buy-in emotionally for them to align to be able to do what just Melih just said about like the EOS system where everybody's got to be into it because otherwise,
Yeah.
just like you said, if someone falls out of line, it falls apart.
Well, here's where two things come in. Thank God they fall out of line because that's where I come in. That's why people hire me. They hire me for support and to support implementation. Because if anybody could have done it on their own easily, they would have already done it. So when we're doing something new, when we're doing something different, initially we don't have buy-in, we have resistance. People don't like change. But in the eye of that, we need support. And the other thing is where Freddie, you always bang the gravel. We need support and leadership. We don't
Right.
need a leader when everybody buys in. We need a leader when the top salesperson tells you, "What are you crazy? Leave me alone." That's when a leader comes in. Not when things are zippity doo-dah, but when things have no zip and it's more doo-dah. So we need
Every entrepreneur,
and implementation.
every entrepreneur, business owner, CEO, you're not 100% infallible. That's all there is to it. That's why it's good to have a team around you to support you and to hold each other accountable. Like EOS, I'm a scaling up coach, which is the same methodology, but people, strategy, execution, and cash. But in the people is the biggest problem that we don't really find because they're not holding each other accountable. They're not setting milestones. One of the things that we recommend is do a 13-week race. We just call it a 13-week plan. In a quarter, there's 13 weeks, roughly, give or take. And if something doesn't get done by that week, so you push into the next week, that's fine. But if you start seeing a pattern of every week you're pushing to the next week, every week you're pushing to the next week, now you got to take a step back and look and go, wait a minute, this is an issue. We need to really address this. That the CEO or the visionary of the organization should have the vision set, disseminated it down through the executive team all the way down to the frontline workers. And if everybody is rowing in the same direction, all heading towards the same end goal and holding each other accountable, and that means having daily meeting rhythms, weekly meetings for tacticals, monthlies, and quarterlies, and having that cadence. And that's where EOS is huge, is on having their meeting structure where you meet and you go through and break up your rocks and you figure out, I forget what it's called, IDS, which is something determine and solve. I forget what IDS stands for, but they have these IDS meetings, and it makes sense.
You can go look it up on chat.
Right.
On chat.
But the other thing too is that
identify, darn, something and solve, whatever.
Never mind.
Discuss.
Don't worry.
one of the
Identify,
other
discuss,
things,
and solve. There it is. I knew I'd figure it out.
Well, one of the other things is when I was working with a language services company a couple of years ago, what we did is we got everybody into it was about 10 people in the company. We got everybody in line and putting together the plan. So it wasn't top down, me saying, this is what we're doing, because you don't get buy-in that way. You get buy-in by getting everybody involved and getting their ideas and what could we do better in this area? What can we implement here? This is what worked. This is what didn't work. What can we tweak? And now everybody's getting aligned into it because now it's part of their plan. They're
Yes, but
part of
as
that
a leader,
they're part of
as
that
a leader,
conversation.
you can't have everybody be the leader. You got to have a leader.
Well, I
And
get that,
true,
but you're controlling the narrative, but
yes,
you're getting everybody into the conversation.
I agree 1,000%. Whenever I work with a company, it's the CEO and the executive team. And if they don't have an executive team because they're a smaller size company, then it's the CFO, the COO, the right hand man or woman,
It
whatever.
should be it should be everybody. I think you got to get some of the people that are the front line because in our case we had people that we're dealing with
I
interpreters or
think suggestion
contractors.
boxes are great, and they should have the right to speak up at any meeting. I agree, and I'm not a dictator type leader at all. Never have been. I've always asked my people, "Hey, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts? What ideas you have?" But when it comes down to setting the direction of the organization and where what you're trying to achieve, the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? The 3 to 5 year goal, 7 to 10
But
year.
that's how we scaled $1 million in one year, though, is we got everybody in line and everybody contributed to their
If you
idea,
can do
the
that,
ideas.
awesome.
Because again, if you got a smaller company that's let's say up to 30 some people, that's easy to do. I completely agree that if you got 100 to 200, 300 team
Yeah.
members, it's a different conversation. But when you're a small business, there's no reason you can't get everybody together and say, here's what our goals are. That's what we did. We created a ridiculously high goal, which was to grow by over $1 million. And my goal was 1.5 million. We grew by about 1 million because everybody was in line and everybody had their ideas that this is what didn't work. And this company had been in business for 30 years. And
Let everybody do their role.
they were
Sure.
stuck between 900 to 1.1 million for 30 some years. And we had to
Well,
change
Freddie,
the whole mindset.
yeah, Freddie, there's something interesting in what you said. Number one is what you're doing is removing the noise and the friction
Mhm.
within the organization, right? You don't want
Mhm.
that noise of everybody, hovering and sputtering all kinds of things and creating rumors and whatnot. And you don't want that friction between, let's say upper management, so to speak, and the staff. Rather, you want unity, right? And so everything you just talked about in terms of getting buy-in, it's 100% based around the fact that you're going to reduce the noise and the friction amongst everybody and bringing everybody together to follow through. And just like Rochelle mentioned, ultimately we're talking about discipline, right? We're talking about a structure, and if everybody's on board, it makes it a hell of a lot easier
Oh yeah,
to make this
Yeah.
you're
happen.
a racing rowing team, and you're
Hey,
just in sync, and you're flying down, and that's how we scaled.
but
And
I'm
then
going
Yeah.
to
because
tell you,
everybody
I
was
Right.
agree to
involved.
disagree with you. How's that? I have
Who
never
are you going
gone to
to disagree
an
with?
organization,
Me or Friday?
any both of you. I have never gone to an organization where you're going to get 100% buy-in. It doesn't exist. In the eye of
Mhm.
not
I
getting
think you
100%
can
buy-in,
build that culture. It takes time.
I think in order, even without 100% buy-in, there will always be people that are resisting because they resist change. So in the eye of resistance, how do you move people forward? That's where leadership is important. It's not through fear, it's through opportunity and inspiration.
Oh
So,
sure.
what are we telling? What is the story that we're telling that people
You want to
feel
get
they
the
can
right
be
people in
part
the
of?
right seats that are holding themselves accountable. I call them wind them up toys because you can basically set them in their position. They know what their job, their role is. They know what's expected of them because you've had those conversations and they just go like a toy soldier. They go do their thing. And when you, it's like being, I liken it to being in the Marine Corps. I'm the platoon, okay? And there's 200 guys in my platoon. I know the guy to the right of me is going to protect my right flank, and the guy to the left of me is going to protect my left flank. And I don't even got to think about the guy on my six behind me because I know he's watching my back. And I can have that 100%. I would die for the guy next to me because I know he would do it for me. That's when you can get that kind of like feeling going in your organization, that kind of culture.
It
Nothing will stop
flies.
you, but
It flies.
it won't happen unless you get the right people in the right seats, doing the right things, holding themselves accountable. And one last point I'll make, then I'll be quiet, is I think it's important to set goals and measurable goals and measure them on a weekly, frequent basis and roll that up into your quarter and see how you're doing. And if it's not working, all right, great, make a change. You know, like
Yeah.
maybe fine, this isn't working. Let's try it this way now. See how that does for a week. But always cut, was it measure twice, cut once?
Yeah,
Always measure your
exactly.
Right.
progress in your business.
And I'm going to add to that and what Rochelle was saying is I remember when we implemented wireless, telephone systems. Basically, we got wireless headsets for everybody, and we went to an IP phone system. Versus they had an old phone system that used to have to hold the handle onto your shoulder
Break your
and you're
neck.
trying to do working. And there was one person in the company that was complaining about the headsets always falling off. And in reality, it was just an excuse of them not wanting to transition and using the new technology. So they kept complaining, these headsets are horrible. They keep falling off and all this stuff. And it was like, wait a minute, everybody else is utilizing them just fine and it's working for them. And all of a sudden, the noise started to get a lot lower on that. It still pop up every now and then, but basically I neutralized it because right, nine other people are utilizing it without an issue. So what's the common denominator?
So let
That's
me take
that,
this conversation up in a different direction because everything we're talking about is related to money at the end of the day, right? And what I mean by that is what is the cost of not doing these reviews? What is the cost of not getting the buy-ins that we talked about? What is the cost of not having that discipline and that structure?
Rochelle
Right?
said
Because
it.
small problems become expensive problems,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Rochelle said it. That little tiny issue that could have become nothing, and it's just a little something we fix, can become
Right.
now this huge issue because you took your eye off the
Right.
ball.
But there's a cost associated to it. And
it's
it's a
the cost
cost,
of
and it's not the cost of doing business, not by any stretch of the
No,
imagination. But
But
no.
it
that
is costing the
that is
business
something I
because
think. Yep.
because you're absolutely right. And I'm going to emphasize that because when this person was complaining about the headset, it got everybody riled up about it because everybody was complaining. And so you're absolutely correct because everybody was no longer paying attention. They were dealing with this issue that really wasn't an issue. And so everybody was
Right.
talking amongst themselves as why has this person got a problem? And it distracted on other things that should have been being done.
And that's on a smaller scale. If you go back to some of the things that Rochelle was saying, on a larger scale, in other words, your annual plan and your quarterly reviews, not having discipline, not having structure, there's a cost
Yep.
to
Huge.
not doing that. Listen, like I think Freddy, you mentioned earlier, if you're a slow solopreneur, okay, fine, do whatever you want to, okay. But the moment you have 5, 10 employees, that changes your environment has changed. And therefore, you have a cost of having that staff. You have a cost of that staff not being effective. You have a cost of that staff not being able to get the job done timely, efficiently. We have to be. There is a cost associated to everything we're talking about today.
I love what you're telling me, Melih, because there's a lot of clients that I work with that I tell they can't make a decision. They're so nervous with they're panicked now with tariffs. Do I do this or not do this? How much is it going to cost me? Do I have to plan for $1 million or 9 million? What's the tariffs going to be in Asia on Monday? On Monday it was 150%. On Tuesday it was 30. I mean, people are really
Right.
struggling. But I always ask this question. It doesn't, we don't have to make the right, we don't have to make the decision right. We have to be able to course correct the decision. And I always say, forget that. What
Good
is
one.
COI? And that's what you're talking about. And we really have to I drill it in that they're afraid of me. COI is what's the cost of inaction? If you do nothing, people think that it's neutral. You know what? We're going to keep it the same. I'm not going to do anything. And everybody believes that no action is neutral. And I'm always there to tell them, no, no, no. No action is a decision, but it's not the decision for growth. It's a decision for what I would consider future Mamma Mia's coming around the board. So what is the cost of inaction? If you don't solve this, if you don't course correct early on, if you don't hire the person that you've been postponing, if you don't clean up your P&L statements because your accounting looks like the national debt of a third world country. So if you don't clean that up, like what is the cost in this? And it has a ripple effect. So the more that we can debrief, the more that we can look at things early on and create structure and get support so that we have the discipline, it just makes the biggest difference.
Yeah,
No
I
question.
agree.
Yeah, I agree. And at
Um,
the same time, it can actually, if you're making, fail to make that decision, that can affect other people because then people follow by example. And you stop, as a leader, you stop making the decisions and you say, well, we'll deal with that next week and everything else. People
No, you
follow what
can't
you
do
do,
that.
not what you say.
Yeah,
in a
and I
little
would
bit.
also.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
I,
I'm going to say this. That's an interesting point, Freddie, because I think what the direction that's going is about feedback loops, right? Leaders need feedback, teams need feedback. You need to have a business where, uh, because if you don't have feedback, let me put it this way, all you're going to do is react, right? So part of the structure that you're trying to develop or the environment or the ecosystem within your business is that the team is open to feedback, and that includes the leaders.
No, totally right.
Right?
Because you
And
points
so
to somebody, you got three fingers pointing back at you.
right, exactly. And so,
I never
you
thought
know,
about that. Yeah, you're right. Look at
you
that.
know, I mean, this is the situation that we have that we're trying to contend with. And I'm just talking about the internal. Obviously, we could sit there and talk about, hey, we need feedback from externally from customers and partners and vendors and so on and so forth. Let's leave all those guys out. Let's just talk about the team. So the team, including the leaders, have to be open to feedback. You can't do feedback without it. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, yes, of course, we want positive feedback, but part of the review process and the debrief that Rochelle is talking about is to identify the shortcomings. And the shortcomings could be that 10%, right? But you don't want that 10% to grow into 30%. So how do we keep it at 10%? And in order to identify the shortcomings, you're going to work through the feedback loop. And the leaders have to be able to be open to the feedback just as much as the team has to be open to the feedback. And the team can't think that the feedback means I'm going to get fired. Okay. We're trying to work together to solve the shortcomings and move forward in a better direction.
That's why having regular meeting rhythms like daily huddles, weekly tacticals, monthly strategy, and then your quarterly reviews is so important. So you're not asking people all day long, hey, what's up with this? What's up with that? You find out in the morning, hey, I'm working on this. Here's where this client is, where this client is. I'm stuck on this. I got a rock, whatever they call them, and you move on. One last thing I'm going to throw in from my side is
Sure.
I always tell people to think about what do you want to start, what do you want to stop, and what do you want to keep in the new year. So when I say stop, it could be things like, for me this year, it was removing myself from as many networking meetings. Other things I
They
wanted to
take
stop
up a lot of time.
was useless phone calls. Like I'm very, very specific when I talk to a center of influence, a person that may refer to me. I tell them exactly, explicitly what I'm looking for. 3 to 30 million. I want to have at least 3 people on the executive team because I'm dealing with low mid-market size companies. And I want them to be coaches and consultants, for instance. Okay. And if they're not
Right.
that, you're referring them to me. Well, I may be able to help them, which I'm willing to do. That's one of the things I want to start. One of the things I want to start is I want to be more diligent about my time blocking. I do time blocking, but I've been relaxed. I can't lie. So I need to be more diligent on my. It's time to read my emails. No, it's not. It's time to work on my LinkedIn. Let me stay over there and not get, ding, ding, ding. All the beeps, bops, and boops are going off, So I
Yep.
wanted to share that.
All right, guys. We're hitting our 25-minute mark. Let's start. Let's think about takeaways. Rochelle, you want to talk? You want to take it away? Start off with
Yeah,
that.
you really need to put the debrief in your system. What worked, what didn't work, what did you learn, what's the correction, and by when. It will make such a difference, and it will take care of a lot of the minor headaches in a company before they become migraines. So just debrief minimum, quarterly, but I would suggest weekly.
Getting everybody buy-in into the direction, and then, as you said, Melih, uh, being able to take the feedback loop because sometimes you need, as the leader, need to make some tweaks and adjustments.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is break things into little chunks and measure them. 13-week race or a 13-week period of 90 days out of your 90 days. And every week, measure how the progress is going. And if you need to adjust, make those adjustments before it becomes that big, giant issue at the end.
And I'm going to stick to what I started with on this show. We need discipline, we need structure, and more importantly, we need adherence to our to the reviews. Right? We need to be able to identify the shortcomings. We need to be able to find ways to improve our process and ultimately reduce the cost that these shortcomings end up causing in the grand scheme of things.
Yep.
So with that in mind, everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. That's it for this week's show of Business Lunatics. Hit follow, hit subscribe, and join the loonies next week for no fluff, no BS, and just pure business madness. Thank you very much.